Welcome to the Storytelling with Data podcast, where listeners around the world learn to be better storytellers and presenters. We'll cover a wide range of topics that will help you effectively show and tell your data stories. So get ready to separate yourself from the mess of 3D exploding pie charts and deliver knockout presentations. And with that, here's Randy. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Storytelling with Data podcast. Today, I'm super excited. As part of our Founders series, I'm joined by a very inspiring founder that I've had a chance to work with for many years, and I'm excited about what he's building, and that is Odun Banjo. So welcome to the Storytelling with Data podcast, Odun.
Thank you so much, Randy. Super excited to be here to chat with you and just talk about all the exciting things happening in the space. So yeah, thank you for having me.
It's kind of crazy because I think back to when we first met, and this was at a place that was quite a distance from where you originally grew up, was it not?
Absolutely. I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, and we met in Zurich, 15 years ago or more? But yeah, I remember you were very open and warm, and that was how I got to know you. You were very approachable then, like during the internship I had at Google. And I just felt like, hey, this was someone I could talk to, I could approach. He was likable. He was warm, friendly, and that was it. So yeah, I think there's that element of your personality making our relationship possible.
This had to be back in 2010?
2009.
So 2009, I'm at Google. I'm a director running all the talent acquisition for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, based in Zurich, Switzerland. On our end, we had built a program where we could try to draw the top talent from Sub-Saharan Africa. We put it out there to find different candidates who might be able to work with our software engineers in an internship capacity. So what were you doing at the time, and how did you find out about the Google opportunity?
I was still in uni at the time, and so I was approaching my final year, and it was one of my colleagues at the time who let me know about the internship. I was like, yeah, this looks interesting. Let me just give it a shot. And I think when I sent in my application, I got feedback. And I was really surprised. Like, okay, whoa, this is real. They started the process and eventually worked out. I really couldn't believe when it happened. I was super excited for the opportunity because, yeah, back in the day, I don't think Google had any presence on the continent at the time. And so this was just a great, rare opportunity, that I had at that time.
That was pretty remarkable because I believe that was your first time. Was that your first time off continent?
Yeah, it was.
So you go from Nigeria to Zurich. I think it was winter time that you joined too.
No, I think it was July.
Was it warm? We probably do it in a
it was summer, so it was like July. I remember getting to Zurich, and like in Lagos has a high population, so like you're just on the streets of Lagos, you always see like people everywhere. And I got to Zurich and I couldn't see like anyone on the road. It was like, where's everybody? Like, why is this place so empty, quiet? What's going on? But that was like an interesting shift to start seeing other parts of the world and how different places are, cities are, people are. Very eye-opening experience.
One of the things that clicked when we met was just you were super interesting. You had been working on some interesting projects too. Do you remember some of the things that you were working on at the time with the Zurich team at Google?
Yeah, we're building data platforms to serve results that were localized, relevant for Africans across countries. And I think that was some of the things we were working on. We're trying to like pull specific answers that were localized from queries when people search on the continent.
That was the early days of really getting a lot of that established, as well as some of the challenges building data platforms in different countries. And so specifically, I remember some of the mapping challenges that we were dealing with, as the Zurich hub was a pretty big center for Google Maps. And to think about some of the unique challenges that we need to be able to address them in the software to be able to actually provide people with interesting mapping within your country. At the end of your internship, what stands out for me was the conversation we had around what to do with the time that you had spent with the Google team. And I know that stuck with you as well. And I thought that might be interesting to share with some of our listeners. That conversation we had around making the most of networks and relationships. You remember that?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember it vividly. I think it was the last official day of the internship. And I think there were a bunch of us, maybe like 20 interns, and then you were just addressing us and like, you guys have had an incredible opportunity, but the biggest thing that you'll be working away from here with is the relationships. So try to stay in touch with people you've met, things like that. I was like, Yeah, I'm going to start with you. And I found a way to keep in touch, just keep you posted on my progress over the years. And that has led to having a really, now you're one of our advisors. It's been a great opportunity and a great relationship we've had. But I think that advice was timely. It was very relevant to me at the time because I probably wouldn't have thought about things that way at that time. For me, it was just how do I upskill myself? How do I get better? But I really wasn't thinking about the power of relationships at that time.
Yeah, it's funny. Out of that room of 20 interns from this program, I think you're the only one who took me up on the offer to stay connected, stay in touch, and it meant a lot. And so I think people forget that not only are you walking in with a ton of knowledge and experiences and you're focused on what's next, but making sure that you make the most of those relationships and that just doesn't happen. I mean, you made a great impression and people thought you were awesome, but time passes and people forget other people. But I think you were really smart about finding those opportunities to check in, whether it was you saw something interesting that I was doing and you might have sent me a note. I actually found an email the other day where before I was heading to SpaceX, you sent me a note talking about, wow, big change. And then also personal things. So you kept tabs with some of the things that were going on in my life, as well as updating me with some of the things that were going on in your life. And so it wasn't ever forced. I think you were genuinely interested in staying connected. And that meant a lot because I could follow along your journey of what you were doing and what you were building. It was super exciting to see you take a lot of the knowledge that you had developed both at your university, but then also at Google, and go on to start to build and truly become a founder, not just once, but multiple times. Share a little bit about what happened after Google and some of the things that you had a chance to build.
Right after Google, I finished up school and joined a startup as a co-founder. We're starting out a mobile advertising network called Twin Pine. This was part of a company called Terragon. At the time, Suelo was the founder of that company, and they reached out saying, hey, he wanted to build something in the mobile space. And I was already super excited about mobile. In fact, like my next opportunity after Google was building like a mobile app for a company. And yeah, that's how, I got started in the startup world. And we ended up building the biggest mobile advertising platform in Africa. And then we eventually transformed that into customer data platform, which is Terragon today. Along the way, I started another startup, which was focused on media. And so we set up these media properties across like news, entertainment, sports. And that became really successful, focused on the Nigerian market. And then after that, moved with my family to Toronto, did a stint at a cybersecurity startup, and then went on to Shopify, spent about 3 years there building products in the channel space. But all along, I always knew I was going to do one more startup. I felt like I had one more startup in me. And so when we moved out, I was surprised to see teams that was working with leveraging like spreadsheets for market research. I was a product manager trying to, do product innovation. And I was just like, yeah, you guys are still like, is this the state of things here? I thought I was coming to a sophisticated market where, you could access insights instantly, more robust dashboards and things like that. I'd always been like a data guy. And so that was the first opportunity I saw. Like, yeah, I think there's something here. There has to be better ways to access insights, at scale, instantly, touch of a button, things like that. And when I got to Shopify, I saw the same problem and I knew it was just a matter of time. And so I think after 3 years, I felt I had done enough. I solved some really hard problems at Shopify, and yeah, it was time to go start this thing.
We'll spend some time talking about it because your company and product Insight 7 is very interesting because of just what you had said, that there aren't a lot of solutions out there that help you deal with qualitative data. And it's surprising because you would think now with a lot of the tools and resources that are out there, we should be able to, with a click of the button, find the insights that might be in a large pool of qualitative data. But that is a really new market. And it's been really exciting to see Insight 7 emerge with a product that helps that space. But I want to jump back a little bit because in our last Founder Series episode, I spoke with a founder by the name of Donny Priliandi, who is in Indonesia. And we had talked a little bit about some of the challenges as he's breaking into the US market about building a startup outside of the traditional ecosystem of startups, that being Silicon Valley or in New York or in Texas. And I'm curious, given you've now had an opportunity to have some success both back home in Nigeria, but then also you spent some time in Canada and now you're stateside. Talk a little bit about building a company in Africa and what are some of the opportunities that helped you to be successful there? And then what are some of the challenges? What are some of the misconceptions about startups in other places beyond Silicon Valley?
My experience building startups in Africa definitely prepared me for like what we're doing here. I think the one thing that kind of like stood out was the fact that the market was much smaller than other markets. And so you had to be more creative, you had to be more aggressive, you had to be more resilient to create value in the market. And so I remember then I'll go to mobile advertising conferences around the world and I'll see other players like us. They're just in different markets, it's the same technology. But these guys are making a lot more money, they're making more revenue, they're growing faster. And I was like, why is that? And I was able to trace it back to the market. And so that was a realization for me that you're always going to be limited by the size of your market. And I knew that whatever I wanted to do next needed to be like a global play just to have more opportunities. So that's the number one thing. It just forces you to be more creative, more resilient, more innovative, and find ways to be successful.
Why was the market small? I mean, one of the things you talked about comparing Zurich to Lagos was the sheer size. Was it because this wasn't a developed market, or what made it? You would think you would have quite an opportunity, and that is, in fact, why a lot of the bigger companies do look to Africa's opportunities, especially mobile, to build things for that space because of the volume and the opportunity.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in the market, but it is smaller than like the US or the Canadian market, for example. And it's mostly because of the purchasing power of the people, right? The GDP per capita, I think in Nigeria is probably like $4,000 or $5,000, but in the US is over $50,000. Same thing in Canada. So the earning power, the ability for people to spend on products or businesses to even spend on products is much higher out here than back home, right? And so that's the number one thing. But the population is there, and so the way to thrive back home or in Africa, even in markets like India, is to build products that can scale in mass. And that's why fintech is a big deal in Nigeria, in India, because you can take the same products and deliver them to consumers at scale. You have the consumer packaged goods as well doing very well. You have the banking sector doing well. So you have to figure out the right kind of products that can help you reach scale. And mostly they'll be consumer focused products. But if you look at it, like even the Indian startups, most of them want to sell into the US. There are markets and there are all markets, right? So that's the big idea.
There's something we talked about in our last episode where this idea of there are opportunities to really build locally and test and scale to as much as you can, but clearly the play is to go global and to have success in the US. And so I think that it's interesting to hear some of the similarities in what you're saying.
Absolutely. I mean, the US market is 10 times the Canadian market today. There's no company anywhere in the world that's trying to be more successful that isn't thinking about selling into the US.
I've heard a couple themes of embracing discomfort. You make a move to Zurich, you'd never been there. I'm assuming when you moved to Toronto, this wasn't you, single guy, making a move to Toronto.
Yeah, absolutely. It was with my family. That was a challenge as well, trying to adapt with the family and trying to figure out. Usually when you make that kind of transition, you're not taking the same kind of like status you have. You're probably like going to find your way and try to build from scratch, career-wise and every other way, financially as well. So yeah, but I've always believed that the bigger risk is taking no risk. And so if you don't take any risk, you're putting yourself at more risk than you thought you were trying to avoid. And so I always believe in stepping out of my comfort zone and being more in charge of the direction of my life. And that's always been like a theme for me.
In your role when you were with Twin Pine, so you were a co-founder, focused primarily as a product manager, helping to develop and bring the product to market?
Yeah, I was involved in the product, trying to figure out how do we localize the product? How do we make sure that we're differentiated? At the time, we also started to see like Facebook and Google ads come into the market. They had a lot of data and we had to figure out how do we differentiate ourselves? What kind of data sets can we go acquire? Things like that to be super competitive in the market.
And how big did the company get? How would you have rated the success of the company over your tenure with them?
We were the biggest platform in that space on the continent. And so in our own right, we were super successful. We started to face a lot of competition from Facebook and Google. And that made it difficult for us to scale to the levels that we wanted to. And I think the whole ad space, mobile ad space, went through a bit of a transition as well. So you had different platforms pop up. You had things like ad exchanges. And so the ultimate play became you had to figure out how you could enable marketing at scale, leveraging unique data sets. And that was what we started to invest in. So we essentially transformed that business into what Terragon is today. And Terragon is still doing well on the continent. So,
what drove you to go to a corporate organization like Shopify after spending time with a startup?
I think for the first, maybe 10 years of my career, it was all startup experience. I always wanted to get a feel of what it was like to build at scale. Or to scale or to build a rocket ship. And I think that's why I was excited about going to a place like Shopify to see the culture, the thinking, the frameworks, the mental models, the lessons, why did they become successful, how do they run their product teams, GTM teams. And I think I was able to get a little bit of that and it gave me a lot of confidence to go out there and build something of my own.
What were you working on at Shopify?
Yeah, channels platform. And so the channels platform team at the time was responsible for integrations into other channels like Amazon, eBay, Walmart. And so we were responsible for building the data models, the capabilities, the user experience that would help merchants sell, not just on Shopify, but also across those channels seamlessly.
It was a big move for you and your family to go to Toronto. You said you were with them for 3 years. And then you made the decision that it's time to make the move and time to go back to my startup roots. What were some of the things going on for you, or what were some of the motivations to say it's time to make the jump now back to the startup space?
Like I said, I always knew I had one more in me, but I didn't know when, I didn't know what, I didn't know how. And so it was a question of let's put all the pieces together. I think towards my third year at Shopify, I knew I was almost there. I had solved a really complex problem that had been happening for years. So I felt like I had some impact. I always think of the periods of my life in terms of how much impact did I have or am I having? And so when I felt like I had enough impact there, I felt like I was getting closer to when it was a good time to leave. Financially as well, I think I was able to build some savings to afford a runway to make that kind of leap. And then I also needed to have the right idea to work on. And so this idea of building a platform that could make sense of data, where you could put your data in and just gives you insights, was one I had for about 3 years at the time. And I continued to explore other ideas, but this one wouldn't go away. And so this guy was at the top of the list for 3 good years. And I knew that it was the one. It was clear to me that this was the problem I needed to solve. I was super passionate about it. I felt like I had what it was going to take to solve it, with a team, of course. But I was just super passionate about this one. And I think the timing was also right in terms of where technology was with the LLMs. Now, we started before ChatGPT launched. I started on the side while I was still at Shopify for a few months before I left. So it wasn't about ChatGPT or what the exciting things that we saw was possible. It was more of technology was getting to that point where it was going to be more seamless to process data, especially text at scale. And there was never going to be a better time. And I think I had 1 or 2 false starts where I tried to put certain things together on the side, and it wasn't just happening. And so I was like, okay, you know what? We're going to start to put together a team. And so it's started to hire people even before I left. I was like, yeah, we're going to will this company to existence. And that was it. And so once we started to hire people, there was no going back, right?
What advice, when you think about others thinking about starting their own company, their own project, as you look back, what would you have done differently? You talked about some false starts, but you talked about how hiring someone actually says, we got to do this now. Somebody else is counting on me. But when you look back, and if you had to put on your advisor hat, what advice would you give to someone who's thinking about starting their own thing. I want to do this. I'm going to leave the safety of a regular paycheck for something new.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. And there are a number of things that need to happen. I think outside of like having a runway to be able to test out your idea or build something out until it starts making money, it's just like, it's critical. And it really depends on where you are in life. Like, do you have families? It's just you? Do you have other streams of income, things like that? But like regarding the product itself and executing and birthing it like a new idea, I think what I'd have done differently was to maybe not hire as many people as we hired initially and maybe hire a different set of people. So might have hired like a designer at the time just to work on prototypes and help us show those prototypes to potential customers. And then when we started to get commitments that we're on the right track, we then start to build. We started to build because I had so much conviction on what we were working on. And so we kind of got lucky eventually because we did a pivot along the way, like after a year, and started focusing on new persona. We initially started with like product managers, and then we started to focus on other kinds of like users within the company, like research teams and go-to-market teams. But it was the same product, so we didn't have to change the product.
We should talk a little bit about the product because it's one of the more exciting products I've seen in a while because of this idea of being able to do something with a lot of data in a meaningful way. How do you tell the story of Insight 7? Put on your storyteller hat and share with the audience just your overview of what it is that you built?
We're building a business intelligence tool that helps you make smarter decisions faster, leveraging the conversations flowing through your business. But the core piece of the platform is the analytics platform that takes calls, interviews at scale, transcribes the calls, the videos, and then starts to analyze that to pull out themes, quotes, reports, anything you want to see in the data, essentially, anything you want to use that data for. We're able to turn that data into something more meaningful. And we started to extend the platform even beyond those early like use cases, doing things like quality assurance on the calls and things like that. And so that's essentially what we're building today.
When we've talked in the past, the light bulb moment went on for me because I don't know how many calls I've been on where you hear before the call starts, this call may be recorded for quality assurance. And I remember thinking like, what do they do with all of these recorded calls? So that's just one example of Insight 7 doing something with data, in this case, recorded calls, and being able to actually deliver insights to, let's say, a quality assurance team. How long from inception to your first paying customer in any capacity?
I don't think it took more than a couple months. So going back to like your question around how do you as an immigrant founder break into a market where you don't have like a lot of relationships or a strong network or knowledge, we were forced to go like product-led from day one. So the concept of product-led growth is one where you allow people sign up on your site, figure things out. If they like, they try it, and then they buy if they like it. We didn't have a choice. I didn't have strong networks here to be able to just go close a couple deals, in the early days. You see a lot of that in the media out there, stories about startups just closing the first 10 deals with their friends. But yeah, wasn't able to do that. And so we're forced to make the platform open from day one and allow people to come try it out. And that has kind of like paid off for us. And so the way we acquired our first customers is they found us somehow on social media, on Google. They came in, they tried the platform, they liked what they saw, and then they bought it. The platform was still buggy, very buggy in the early days. And so we had to continue like working at those things, making it more reliable before we got to where we are now, where, we have way more customers and they're super happy with what we have.
And far less buggy, I'm assuming.
Far less buggy. No more bugs.
Exactly. Talk about your role as a storyteller when you think about being a founder and even convincing people to give up their jobs to come join you on this journey, whether you've raised investment capital or not in the early days. But talk about the role of storyteller, how that's helped you and how that's had to evolve.
Sure. I think the biggest piece right now so far has been conviction in terms of telling that story, just believing so much in an idea and the fact that a product needs to exist, or a future state needs to exist, that has been a driver. And out of that, I've been able to, bring on board advisors, recruit really talented people, even acquire customers around the vision of what we're building. I think one of the core values that we have today is that innovation is really hard and it takes a lot of courage to innovate. And we want to be that company inside Seven that celebrates the courage it takes to innovate. We know what it takes to innovate within a company, small, big, or to dare to start something new. It's going to take a lot of courage to have impact, regardless of the path you take. But you don't do that innovation without insights. And those who are seeking the insights to drive that innovation, we want to celebrate them. And so we try to get the people on the team, people who work with us, to resonate with that, to connect with that, try to appreciate what they're doing as well in that area. And that's kind of like how I've approached like telling stories to inspire people around me.
I'd love for you to share the story, because this one stood out to me, where you had a bit of an aha moment when it came to pitching a potential customer by essentially using your product to do just that. You want to share a little bit about that story?
Yeah, absolutely. One customer comes to mind, and they were kind of like the first to buy one of our new products or use cases. They live not too far away from where I live, about an hour away, but they came in inbound. They reached out saying, hey, we're trying to solve this problem. We didn't really have the features. And so I connected with the CEO.
Can you share a little bit what the problem was?
Oh, right. Yeah. So they have like customer success calls that they wanted to analyze and really understand the performance of the reps on those calls and things like that, and just monitor for like quality. And we didn't have the product at the time, and I thought it was very interesting. And so I met the CEO, but after like the first call, I met the CEO on the next call, and then we said, yeah, let's do like a pilot. And so we had another conversation, and I was like, okay, yeah, well, why don't we do the pilot in person? Like, why don't I come to your office and show you like the results of what we're doing? And so I really appreciated the fact that they were willing to work with us to craft a solution. And so when I went to their office on that day, it was like I was already on my way there. I was driving there, and we were still trying to get the product live, like get the demo live for them. And so it was super close. It was just a couple of minutes. The team was able to get in the product into their account. And so when I got there, showed them the thing with their data, and it was like, and I remember very clearly, like one of them was like, holy moly.
Holy moly.
Holy moly. And I was like, yeah, I think we got them. I think we built something here. And so it was able to see like the data in a different way and get to the insight versus manually listening to those calls. And that really sparked something in me, like, hey, I think we have something here, and let us continue to build around this. And there are customers today that really like the product. They're giving us a case study, testimonials, things like that. And so that's super exciting to have that kind of customer and that kind of experience.
That came from essentially getting their data to work within your system so they can see, here's your data, here's your data on Insight 7. And you created this delight moment by hustling to be able to show how the product would actually work with their data.
They were super supportive of us not having a solution at that time. And I don't think every business is that way, but this company is unique. They're quite special folks. And yeah, they were very patient with us, gave us all the inputs we needed, and we just figured out a way to make it work. And that's how many products are built today. Just finding the people call it like design partners. You find someone who has a problem, you might have something that's not quite there, and then they work with you to craft a solution. But many times you have design partners who don't pay for the product or get a lot of significant discounts on the price. But this was very interesting that we gave them a discount, right? But it was very exciting to kind of like learn and come up with like a new idea with them, working very closely with them. That was a memorable experience for me.
How has the product evolved? I mean, some of the things I've seen currently are really interesting, where you talk about having these video testimonials from people. Maybe you're doing a customer interview, you're a pharmaceutical company interviewing people who are participating in a test study, and you see a particular theme that's emerged. And if somebody wants to drill down, it can go all the way to this level of producing the video where the person says, and yes, there were no side effects from this drug that I took. And so I think it becomes really powerful because it can provide this insight at a top level all the way down to, well, where is the evidence behind that? And you can get down to that granular level. How have you evolved the product, either based on feedback from customers or where you've seen the market start to shift and what we're actually able to do these days?
We take two approaches to like evolving the product. So one is just purely based on our vision, like where should the product go? What's the future state? What do we have strong convictions about? And then the second pillar is customer feedback. What are customers asking us for? What should we build next for them? What do they need? And I, as the product leader on the team, try to balance that. And we typically would have like times when we're just super focused on building what customers want. And then maybe another couple of weeks where we shift mode and we just start building where we think the product should go. And so we have like phases like that. And that's kind of like how it's like a tension. We just use that to nudge the product forward in the right direction. And I think where a lot of companies make mistakes is just either optimizing for one versus doing both. You're either just building what customers want and you're not thinking about where the product should go. You're going to have a product that doesn't scale, that doesn't support the customers long term. You're going to be disrupted very quickly. And if you're just building where you think the product needs to go versus like baking that in customer feedback, very soon you're going to have something that nobody wants. And so that balance is super critical. And I think that's something I'm very, very mindful of. Like sometimes I'm like, yeah, who asked for that thing that we're trying to build? Like, does anybody need that thing? What signals are we building against, right? So I have to check the team, check the roadmap constantly to make sure that we're on the right track. And it's kind of like worked for us so far.
How much has the LLMs out there impacted what you're building or perception of what you're building? I mean, are people saying, well, yeah, what you're building, I could just upload a bunch of videos into ChatGPT and I get the same thing?
That's a great question. We get that a lot, but I think I'm at the point where I'm no longer worried because we're super clear on what makes us unique. And so, yeah, the beauty of LLMs is that they're able to analyze text at scale. And that's one of the core reasons why our platform is able to deliver so much value because of that technology. And so there's always that bit of, hey, why can't they do what you're doing? Like, why can't they do this at scale? So for us, we just think about all the things that they cannot do well or do at scale. And we try to focus more on those things. You cannot use ChatGPT, for example, today without prompting. And you don't need prompts to leverage our platform to analyze data. You cannot process calls at scale on ChatGPT. And it will be very difficult for them to do that across multiple use cases and across like multiple types of products, like a product like ours can. They don't have dedicated workflows to go from data to meaningful assets or actions. Those are things that we're building. We are more focused on functional use cases. They try to appeal en masse to consumers. And so there's so many areas where we recognize the uniqueness of our platform and we try to really make that prominent and obvious in the app, in the experience. And people come and tell, hey, yeah, your templates are unique. These highlight reels are unique, or I don't have time to start prompting. I just need to get the insights and move on to the next thing. And so we think of ourselves as we are for people who have a lot of data and we're for people who are busy. They're too busy to start prompting and wrangling with the data. We're here to make that process easy. We're for people who want to see what they didn't even know about the data was possible. And so I think those who are customers today are those who get the value easily. And I think over time, there will be a gap between like what specialized products like ours can do versus what the LLMs are doing directly to appeal to everybody.
When you look at the landscape of what's happening with AI, I mean, this is something we get asked nearly every workshop is what role is AI going to play in telling data stories and creating great business communications? What's your read on the landscape of what's happening from an AI perspective?
Yeah, AI is real. It's here to stay. It's transformative. It's changing businesses. We won't be where we are without the power of this technology. I'm able to do a lot more as a founder. And I'm also trying to change the DNA of my team constantly or elevate the way we work. So like today, I remember we're trying to work on a new feature, and the natural flow is, hey, designer needs to come in and come up with a design before like engineering can pick it up. I was like, you know what? A designer is currently busy. He has so many things he's working on. Well, how about we just prototype this thing? And so went into Claude with the engineer, and I was like, hey, how about we just put in the brief, come up with the prototypes. And when I showed him the UI that Claude was able to come up with, he was amazed. And it was like, yes, this works. I was like, yeah, we're in a new age. You have to adapt very quickly. You have to adapt very quickly to what's possible today. And so you're able to move 10x faster, or maybe even 100x faster. It really depends on how you're leveraging these technologies. It feels like we're a team of 20 people or 30 people because of what AI makes possible today. And so we're going to continue to see AI accelerate workflows to get jobs done. I think it's still very early days in terms of having like AI employees that can just 100% replace people. I don't see that happening in like massive companies anytime soon. It's going to take a number of years before you can really delegate like a whole like position to AI, because there's so many nuances, and you're seeing the trends with like AI agents, everybody, the buzzword right now. But the feedback is that a lot of them have a lot of errors. They're not reliable. They don't have enough context. And so like the technology is still very early, but it makes a lot of things possible today. And so the way I think about it is like continue to leverage what it can do today while, setting up the systems and the foundation to take advantage of what it would be able to do tomorrow. So for example, our platform, by the LLMs just getting smarter, it's improving our product without us doing anything extra, right?
Wow, so you're actually seeing an improvement in your product because of how AI is learning.
For sure. I mean, so it's not learning on the data. I mean, for us, we tell customers we're not learning on your data, we're not training on your data. And the LLMs are not learning on the data, but the LLMs by themselves are getting better at analysis, being able to analyze text. And just because that's also a piece of the underlying tech stack, it's improving the quality of the product. I know I can see the progress almost 3 years after when we first started building with those APIs. Can see the quality in the results we're getting. And so they're getting better, but there's still a lot of work to be done on the application layer. And I think that's where a lot of value will be created, because there'll be specialized, unique workflows for jobs to be done that people don't have time to go start figuring things out. And so those who are able to build out those experiences and workflows are the ones that are going to capture a lot of the value that this technology is going to create.
It's funny you say we're in the early stages, which of course we are. But if I think back, you're actually one of the people who introduced to me the power and potential of where AI was going right when it was getting started. I mean, do you remember this was probably 3 years ago when you came to visit us?
Yeah,
here?
Absolutely. 2002.
And you were talking about this thing. And then I remember afterwards, I said, I have to go look this up. What is this? And you had said another interesting thing. I think this was in a post you had on LinkedIn recently where you talked about the power of accessibility and making something approachable and accessible from an audience perspective. And again, this is something we try to teach in our workshops, which is you can create the greatest data visualization on earth, but if your audience is left scratching saying, what am I looking at? What is this? How does this work? And so I remember and thought of this connection because you made a post where you talked about how ChatGPT was available, engineers were using it, but there was a tipping point for them. Do you remember what that post was about?
Yeah, absolutely. The layer, the interface that they created on top of the technology was what helped kind of like start this wave. And I think there's going to be many more examples like that, maybe not at that scale, in different like niche verticals, industries, where you find the right experience and you just open up a lot of opportunity for people in that industry. So chat is not going to be the default accessible interface for people to leverage this technology across industries. Voice will be better for some will still be UI based, some would be more predictive, like you just know, like you don't have to do anything. And so founders, product teams will need to figure out, that's the work to be done. You have to figure out what's the right experience and interfaces for you to make your product or value accessible to as many people as possible.
You talked about having the power of these AI models to help you be more efficient, more productive. So share with us your top 3 time savers that have completely transformed the way you work based on leveraging one of the AI models.
Yeah, so it's funny. I initially started with ChatGPT. I moved to Claude, and then I'm back on ChatGPT. And I think the biggest reason for ChatGPT is the memory. So over time, ChatGPT has built a lot of context around me as a founder, my business, what we do, our products, and just stacking up that memory has made it so sticky for me that when I have to brainstorm new ideas, come up with like new stories, posts, briefs, I tell it and it understands the context. So that context is super powerful. It's not just the data, it's more of the context, being able to connect. Data is like what is, but context is the connection between what is. And so it being able to have a connection or connected dots between like everything I've shared over time is so powerful. And even when Claude became so much better than ChatGPT, the context was enough to make the results good enough for me. And I still use Claude. There's certain things I'll go to Claude for, like, hey, write this stuff for me. I think Claude is good at thinking and writing stuff. And so I'll go to Claude, or I'll take input from Claude and from ChatGPT and move it to Claude to maybe summarize or edit. I also use Claude for prototypes. So whenever I want to come up with UIs or visualize stuff or visualize ideas, Claude is like my go-to app for that. And so I think like all the LLMs have different like strengths. I don't know what Google is doing right now. I've not been able to get a lot of value from Gemini. I think they really need to get that going. Believe a lot in their tech stack. And in terms of other technologies, there are other ways that we're trying to leverage creating videos faster for like promotional content online. That's one of the ways we're also using it, creating like infographics or presentations. My last speaking opportunity, I used, an AI solution to create my deck because I didn't have enough time to start from scratch. And so like there are different ways you can leverage these technologies to go faster, to brainstorm ideas or think of things that you never even thought about in the first place. And I also I keep getting my team to like, hey, you should be able to code faster today because I think I write code, right? Are you using it the right way? How do we move faster as a team? So yeah, I'm really looking at every area of the business, including myself, to really optimize how we work.
I've been surprised at how well Grok works for a number of different things. So I know you didn't mention Grok, but from a coding perspective, I am not an engineer. I don't play one on the internet, but I'm required to use a lot of no-code solutions. I'm a huge fan of Zapier. We use it to run many aspects of the storytelling with data business. And one of the things that I used Grok for and was able to do some pretty interesting coding with, which most engineers who might be listening to this are going to say, Randy, that's nothing. But what took me less than maybe a half hour to an hour of back and forth with Grok, I was able to build a simple JavaScript within the Google Sheets app that tied into the API for a new asynchronous course that we offer people to learn on their own. And when somebody might purchase this course, there was no way to actually capture that besides getting an email and say, Odun has bought this course. And okay, great. But we wanted to be able to bring it back into our ecosystem so we knew and we could kind of track how people were doing. I gave the outline to Grok of what I needed, and it helped walk me through everything from start to finish. And I built something similar, or I shouldn't say I did, but I worked with an engineer to do that. And when I look back to some of the early stuff that took literally months of back and forth, getting errors, to as soon as I would insert the code and deploy it, I could see the errors coming up, share it back with Grok and say, oh, here's the problem, and then make modifications. It just blows my mind. And while I used to say to parents when they'd say, Randy, as a recruiting expert, if I want to make sure my son or daughter has the best option for work, what should they do? I'd always say, like, get a degree in computer science. I don't know if I'd say that anymore. I don't know if you'd agree, but coding at least for a lot of the things that we're able to do. And seeing people being able to build apps real time is just blowing my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's still important to learn how to code. And at least from the perspective of understanding how to build systems and data models and data structures and how the architecture works, like understanding the whys and the hows versus just the what. What does the AI apps of today would do is just give you the what. And then so like, how do you scale that? How do you make that? How do you turn that into something else? How do you change that? How do you make it better? And so that's where understanding the fundamental principles of coding comes in. So I think it's still important to learn how to code. And also like the technology is going to impact more of the junior folks across like industries and people who have a lot of experience. So people who have a lot of experience will be able to do the things that
more faster
the junior folks can do with the experience they have. And so they're going to be able to move a lot faster. And I think there'll be opportunities for like junior folks to transition to become that. But what you're going to have is going to have flatter organizations, like less bureaucracy. You can go get stuff done. You don't need to hire so many people to get projects done. Things like that is what we're going to see shifting. And then, of course, people will also have to like transition to like new roles. New companies will be built. But where this is all going is like there's going to be less manual grunt work in the future. And we'll all have more time for the things that really matter to us, things that we really enjoy spending our time on. But right now, everybody's still busy. I'm sure if I ask you, like, you still don't have enough time in your 24 hours to do the things you really care about. And so AI hasn't had that impact that we think it's having yet. But it's probably going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah.
I'm assuming you still have family back in Nigeria. You're still in contact with people. I mean, some of the team, right, is still in Nigeria. How has AI impacted folks living there versus what you're seeing happening here? Is there a gap that's widening? Is there an adoption of it in unique and different ways that we might be surprised by?
Yeah, great question. I don't think there's a gap. I think that's the beauty of what's happening today. It's a global phenomenon that almost anybody anywhere can take advantage of. It's easier than ever to build global companies from anywhere today. And this just makes you, require less capital, less people to bring your ideas to life. And so, I think the challenge will continue to be the market. It's one thing to build a great product. It's another thing to sell it and make it and scale it and make it super successful, right? So that will continue to be the challenge, which location, makes difficult unless AI can shorten the time it takes to get to places and help you like teleport and things like that, maybe. But I don't see a gap today. I think a lot of people everywhere have the same kind of opportunities. In tech specifically, it started with like cloud, I think. Or rather, it started with the internet. So with the internet, we all had like almost equal opportunities. And then cloud came, made it easier to scale a tech company without building the same data centers that Google has built. And then now I think AI is like the third wave of that, just making it possible for anyone anywhere to build something really successful from almost nothing.
And you're right. It seems like this cycle repeats. Even when you were talking about how you had gone between ChatGPT and Claude, but found yourself going back because of the context and understanding. And if you think back early in Google, a lot of it was around building habits and relationships with users. So there would be this continuity where if you started to go outside of the ecosystem, it felt very foreign to you. I mean, we see it with Android versus iPhone. People, they get used to how things work and lay out. And I do think that the organizations that are able to really capture that relationship with the user over time have the best potential. And so maybe ChatGPT is in a strong position because of their ability to build and scale and be able to support it, both from a infrastructure standpoint, but also from the technology itself. I think you should try this, given you've been using ChatGPT for some time, but go back to it and say, given how long we've worked together, how would you describe me? It'll be interesting to see all of the ways in which you communicate, the things you go to it for. I did that, and it brought up that I'm a curious person who has a wide range of interests and likes to drill deeply into topics, especially as those related to health, wellness, technology. So it was pretty spot on. And so I do think that relationship over time will not only create more user connection, but then there will clearly be a lot of topics around privacy and data and making sure that people feel like their information is safe with the technology that they're utilizing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think we're going to get there.
What's next for Insight 7?
Scale. We have built something people really love and still making it better, trying to make sure that we deepen that love, that connection customers have. But yeah, we're just in a phase where we're trying to get what we have to more people, get more people to know about us. And so I, as the founder, I'm really trying to do more outreach, marketing, just get more awareness out there, because I know if we do that well, then we'll be more successful. We're also thinking about the next phase of the product as well. Just how do we evolve the product and make it better and more connected to the day-to-day lives of the people that use us today. That's something I'm thinking a lot about. And also just creating like a great experience. Like I think like our customers definitely come first because we're here to serve them. But I think about our team as almost as important as our customers, if not on the same level. Really depends on how you look at it. And so I'm really looking forward to us building a great company with a great culture and really rewarding our people to be the best that they can be and show up in the best ways they can every day. And that's something I'm really looking forward to. I think we're on our way there, and we'll soon be a company that a lot of people aspire to be part of. And those who have helped to build what we have would be able to be in a really good place to enjoy the fruits of what they've built.
And our audience is made up of a lot of data-minded people and people who work with a lot of data. I think we should highlight what's really cool about Insight 7 that this is a product that an individual data analyst who's working with qualitative data could use and benefit from tomorrow, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Instantly, within a minute, you get insights and people are blown away. They complete the onboarding of our app.
So you can be up and running in just a few minutes. Somebody goes to insight7.io.
People ask me a lot, like, where did the name come from? And so the story is that I wanted Insight to be in the name. I wanted to have a sticky name, a name that's memorable. And while trying to figure out other names, I kept coming back to Insight. So like, wait, if your Insight is in the name, what else is going to be there? Like, we can't just call ourselves Insight. Played with so many options until we landed on numbers. I was like, okay, what's the best number? And so 7 symbolizes completeness or perfection. And so we want to be the one place that has all your insights, complete view of your business, all the insights you need to, drive the right decisions in your business. And so that's where the name came from. So yeah.
Insight 7. It reminds me of my last conversation about Happy 5. Donnie wanted you to be happy 5 days a week. Clearly, Insight 7's every day of the week. We're not taking the weekends off. We're going to make sure you have insights every day of the week. That's a good one.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to always share about our story and journey. Building this. Super excited to work with you on this journey as well. And I think the one thing I'll just share with anyone listening is that this is like the best time to be alive today, ever. And so there's a great opportunity to build, to transform, to improve, to innovate, leveraging everything that's possible, not just AI. Like so many things have just been democratized today. And a lot of the assumptions we have around, I need to be in San Francisco to build a great company, or I need to have all these things. Like those things are just like excuses not to do the thing. And so if you really want something, just go for it. Just follow your passion. Life is too short. You don't want to be older and then live with regret. And so go for your dreams. The world is in a much better place to help you bring that dream to life. And that would just be my parting word.
Thanks for that. I love your story. I love your journey. Love working with you. Love what you built. So it's really a pleasure. And I agree. I have immense gratitude with the times we're living in, and immense gratitude for having people like you and have a chance to know for all these years. And to be excited to watch what you're building and growing. And I couldn't be more proud of what you've done. So thanks for joining us today. This has been super fun.
Thanks, Randy. Thank you for having me.